it also advances the rows for you so you can always see your slides. Whereas if you're doing with the mouse, if you click on anything, it does not advance the rows. You have to constantly scroll. But that's up to you, whatever works best for you. So what'll happen? So what's happening is right now, if I scroll up here, you can see what's going on. So this is the pre-services slides. And what it'll do is, normally we could have started an hour ago, and it
Welcome to this sacred space. My name is Edris Harrell, and on behalf of First Unitarian Church of Wilmington, I welcome you to our worship service, whether you are here in the sanctuary or watching online. You are welcome, no matter your identity, your spirituality, or whom you love. For those of you online, you are invited to click on the visitor card link that is in the chat. You are all also invited to come back to First U today at 3 p.m. for the Worcester Quartet concert, with a reception afterwards to meet the musicians. Admission is free. The concert is kicking off the Counterpoint Fund Drive, which raises money for the church's music program. Quite coincidentally, when Reverend Larry told me the title of today's sermon, I was actually in the middle of reading the book it was inspired by, called Democracy in Retrograde. We will look at the different ways we participate in civic engagement. One of the ways is coming to a place of community where you interact and have conversation with others, just like coming to church. So, let's start by turning to your neighbors to greet them. And to our live stream viewers, please greet your fellow viewers in the chat. Good morning. So, is there a certain order this way or this? Let's see what happens. Yeah. A loud one. And now let us prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Larry Piers, minister here at the First Unitarian Church of Wilmington. That music was just so lovely, and wasn't it? And it's only the beginning of music that we're going to have during the service that might feel like a trip down memory lane for some of you today. I'm not going to say any more, but you'll notice when we get to some songs that you're going to remember the time that you used to sing that very often. So, for many years, yes, it does look like it, doesn't it? For many years, Unitarian Universalist congregations and Unitarian Universalists have found our 7 principles have helped us to ground our faith in both practices and aspirations that we could work towards individually and together. Although some new articulations of our UU values have been adopted this past summer, this does not do away with these principles. So as I state each principle, I will drop a stone in this vase to symbolize that each of these principles are touching stones for us that can help us move through our own lives and our work as Unitarian Universalists. These principles give us a compass, particularly in the challenging times in which we are in which several of these principles, you will notice, are being challenged in concrete and decisive ways. Here are the 7 principles which Unitarian Universalist congregations have covenanted to affirm, to promote, and to practice. First, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Second, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Third, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Next, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So as we gather to worship this morning, may we feel a recommitment to these touchstones, and may our commitment make as much noise as the stones did as they hit the bottom of this vase, so that others will know what it is that we value, what it is that we stand for. May you feel a renewal and a motivation to put these principles into faithful, deliberate, and liberatory action.
For those of you watching online, if you have a chalice, I invite you to join me by lighting it as I read these words by Pat Uribe Lichty. We face a challenge to democracy, a challenge that calls us to hope in moments of despair, a challenge that asks us to persist in the faith that we can and must make a difference. May our flaming chalice recommit us to truth in our words and our actions, that we may live as we believe people should live. Please rise in body or spirit and sing hymn, "This Land is Your Land."
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island. Redwood Valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. I've roamed and rambled, and I've followed my footsteps through the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Well, the sun came shining and I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving and the dust clouds rolling, as a voice was chanting as the fog was lifting. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
Please join me in affirming our mission. First Unitarian Church of Wilmington is a beloved community that nourishes minds and spirits, fights injustice, and transforms the world through loving action.
So let's enter now into a time of prayerful meditation, finding first a stillness within our own body, feeling held by the chair, allowing your feet to caress the earth and for the earth to caress your feet back, allowing yourself to feel the natural rhythm of your own breathing as it is already occurring, as you settle in to this present moment, as you settle into this opportunity to practice loving kindness, loving kindness, loving kindness. First, let us practice loving kindness towards ourselves. So you may repeat silently to yourself, or even aloud if that helps you, with eyes closed or eyes cast down, whatever works for you. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. Focus on generating that feeling of love and compassion first toward yourself. And now let us practice loving kindness towards our loved ones. Picture a loved one or loved ones in your mind. Hold them in your heart. And repeat the same affirmations. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. Feel the warmth in your heart directed towards loved ones. And now let us practice loving kindness towards someone whom we might consider an acquaintance. Maybe not someone that we know that well, someone who caught our attention somehow or another. Someone that we could send loving kindness to as a way of expanding the compassion that is ever present in our heart, that is ever wanting to expand. So think of someone that you might know casually. Think of an acquaintance, someone who caught your attention recently. And let us say to them, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. Let's imagine ourselves expanding the circle of compassion to this person. And finally, let us practice loving kindness towards challenging individuals. You get to define what challenge means. But someone that you know is a little stretch for you to naturally feel loving kindness. But in the practice of loving kindness, we allow ourselves to stretch. We allow the circle of compassion even to include those who are challenges to us. So bring to mind someone you may have some difficulties with or even some conflicts, and include them in your circle of compassion. Say to ourselves, silently or aloud, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. Allowing our own circle of compassion to stretch and to include allows us to grow in that circle of compassion as well. And so, in the shared silence that follows, let us stay with this experience of practicing loving kindness. Let us stay in this experience of being in compassion and being present to all that is. Each week in our service, we also give ourselves an opportunity to attend to whatever it is that we might be holding in our own heart, whatever is weighing us down in any particular way. And so turn your attention now to those concerns that you are holding. And in the company of this caring community, either online or in this sanctuary, if you care to speak aloud that concern so that others might hold alongside of you that concern and embrace you and your concern, you may speak it aloud now. Gun violence.
People of Springfield, Ohio. Nebraska. Hate and lies. Patients in Springfield. Whole city.
The impending election.
Access to health care. The future of democracy. Social media.
So if you care to hold your hands out this way to symbolically represent that you are holding these concerns that others, even beyond yourself, have, feel the weight of those concerns. And during the week, you might hold them even longer as you bring those concerns of others to mind and heart. There's got to be a joy somewhere. Someone have a joy that they would like to share in this room so that we might share that joy with you and maybe even be impacted by the joy that you might have. Anyone have a joy?
The joy that educators spread now as the fall begins.
Okay.
Surprise visitors, family visits.
Oh, nice. Great.
Lauren and Kyle's marriage.
Yes, and I have a joy, Lucy, that you were able to join them, go to California and be with them. So glad that could happen.
Alina's granddaughter.
Helena's new granddaughter.
Beautiful weather.
My 21-year-old granddaughter.
This congregation.
This congregation.
Fashions cross country success.
Her granddaughter's playing flag football.
And they won their first game.
Great. For good coaches, we have a joy. Notice what happens when we share our joy with one another. Our own heart gets a little lighter. Smiles come over our face, and we find connections with one another that we didn't even know were there, but they become visible to us in the joy that we feel for ourselves and for others. So now, let's join in our musical meditation.
the quiet and the stillness of the morning.
The following is adapted from People, Power, and Change, Organizing for Democratic Renewal by Marshall Gans. Rabbi Hillel, the first century Jerusalem sage, when asked what to do with one's life, responded with 3 questions to ask yourself. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? This is not a selfish question. It is a self-regarding question. If we are to live or lead with integrity, clarity about our own values, resources, interests, and aspirations matter. It can be very hard for us to be fully present to others if we are not fully present to ourselves. When I am for myself alone, what am I? To be a who, a human being, and not a what, a thing, is to recognize that we exist in relationship to others. We are relational creatures, and our capacity to realize our own objectives or even shape them is inextricably wrapped up with the capacity of others to realize theirs. If not now, when? This is a recognition of the fact that we can rarely learn to do well what we hope to do without beginning to do it. If we spend all of our time planning, or what Jane Addams called the snare of preparation, we might be tempted to wait until the world will totally conform to our expectations. Except this never happens. The reality is that understanding flows from action rather than preceding it. And because we cannot know the future, action always entails risk, demanding the courage to take risks.
I feel a sermon coming on. You have probably heard this most famous teaching of the Jewish teacher Hillel before. As a prominent rabbi and a teacher during the reign of Herod, Hillel influenced and slanted religious practice towards emphasizing ethical and moral living as an essential element in Jewish religious practice. He understood ethics as God's central demand on us. The emphasis on living a life guided by ethical living and care for one's neighbor, for the other, what I call the common good, was indeed influential in Jewish teaching and included Jesus' teaching, and by the early and as recorded by the early communities that were formed around Jesus' teaching. Those who honed Jesus' message were influenced by the message of a teacher who emphasized ethical living long before the doctrines and the dogmas of Christianity emerged, hundreds of years later. Hillel and those whose thought he influenced recognized that it is our ethical action in the world that most expresses our commitment to religion. And at this moment in history, most of us may find ourselves paralyzed and powerless in response to the enormity and the scope of what is happening in this world. Am I right about that? It's really not that we don't care. It may be that we just don't know how to care and where to start. It could be that we are caught in the tension of wanting to care for others and also to care for ourselves in the midst of feeling overburdened, overwhelmed, and powerless to make a difference. Harrell has something to offer to us in his teaching. Harrell's teaching does push us out of this tension of either-or thinking when he offers us this understanding that we need to both care for ourselves and the other. When he states, if I'm not for myself, who will I be? Who will be for me? We can recognize that, yes, we have to care for ourselves. When he states, when I'm for myself alone, who am I? We can recognize that to focus only on ourself alone limits our innate capacities as human beings to be compassionate, to be in relationship with others, and in so doing, to be more of ourselves. And Harrell teaches, if not now, when we can recognize that simply being perturbed, getting caught up in the paralysis of analysis, or the endless doom scrolling, may feel like we're doing something, but the truth remains, inaction is action. This understanding is perhaps what led both Edris and I to coincidentally be reading the same book at the same time, Democracy in Retrograde, How to Make Changes Big and Small in Our Country and in Our Lives. The authors, Sami Sage and Emily Amick, recognize how overwhelming and challenging, how immobilizing and isolating this moment in history can feel to us who care and want to care, but don't know what we can do to actually make a difference. Yet they proclaim and use the whole book to guide us in a practical way towards one of their conclusions, and I'll quote, "The solution to our problems is all of us, each stepping up in our unique ways. You don't need to do everything, but we really need everyone to do something." Now, I know that sometimes when we hear the word everyone, I know that some of us begin to think of to ourselves, even unconsciously, everyone doesn't include me. Or this is meant for someone else, not me because I'm to this or I'm to that. I can identify with that. If I can start to observe my own self-talk at this point, I could easily be saying to myself, everyone doesn't include me. I'm too busy. I'm doing too much already. And if I start listening to my own emotional response right now, I can sense my own feelings of overwhelm about where to even start given the scope of things. Or we might even observe that we have a series of inner statements, propositions that begin with the phrase, if only, such as, if only I had the time. If only it wasn't so cray-cray out there. If only I wasn't so old. Or if only I wasn't so beautiful. I imagine on a tombstone that someone has engraved the phrase, if only, ... My first interpretation of this image is to say that any one of us could die with our if onlys on our lips. And then it occurs to me another way to understand this image is to understand that we can actually bury that phrase, if only, right now. So now the image comes to mean, here lies all of our if only statements. And maybe, it may be if we can imagine burying that phrase altogether, we might be relieved of the actual cost that our postponements have had on our lives, on others, and for future generations. Maybe if we can imagine burying that phrase, we could open up to a generative space before us. Let's all look at our wrist right now and imagine that we have a bracelet. Come on, look at your wrist. Imagine you have a bracelet around the wrist with the letters WWHD. Imagined it? So who can tell me what the letters stand for? What would Hillel do? Yes, you've been paying attention. So maybe, as we touch that imaginary WWHD bracelet every time we hear an internal if only statement in ourselves, we can begin to interrupt that immobilizing postponement and hear Hillel's phrase, if not now, when? Let's hear that phrase a little louder. Maybe you can say it. Maybe as we listen just a little longer, we can actually hear ourselves say, if now, how? Say that. We all really care about something. I know we do. So take a moment now and think about 3 concerns that you care about in this world. And if you have to choose just one of those 3 concerns to actually do something about, which one would you choose? So take a moment and do that right now. Everyone got something? Thought of something? Yes or no? Okay. So no one needs to tell anyone else what they should care about. I suspect we all do have something we already care about. No one needs to tell anyone how to respond or to act on behalf of what we already really care about. Each of us can, however, and Sage and Amick say, step up in our own unique ways. We are more likely to act, however, if we feel the support of a community around us. In the midst of all that can seem discouraging in the world around us, we can make it a practice as a Unitarian Universalist congregation to be encouragers of one another. We can create a space for people to connect with those issues that they already really have a genuine empathy towards. We can encourage each of us to find ways to respond in ways that are available to us, in whatever small or grand ways. We can encourage by joining with one another and not feeling alone in what we care about. One great example of this is the postcards that we have been sending around to various states in the country. And Susan, if you don't mind standing, how many postcards has this congregation already sent to encourage people to vote? 12,000. Okay. And did you hear that clapping? Did you hear that applause, Susan? Because the work isn't done, right, Susan? Tell us what else needs to happen. Okay, so she still has packets of postcards, 30 in a packet that you can take and write postcards on your own time, or at brouhaha with a group of friends, whatever you'd like to do, so you don't have to do it alone. What I appreciated the most about Sage and Amic's approach is that it recognizes, as they state, that civic engagement is a form of self-care, making your voice heard by your elective representatives and becoming engaged in your community are fundamental assertions of self-worth and self-esteem, they state. In a democratic society, this is how you say, I have a voice and the right to use it, and my contributions and my beliefs matter. It's both self-care and care for the common good. Now, this is where a yes, but response may be perking up in you. You might be saying, yes, I have a voice and a right to use it. Yes, my contributions and beliefs matter, but are we forgetting about what is happening out there, especially in the political realm? Indeed, we may be in a time when, as Sage and Arnick says, democracy is in retrograde. We need to name first what is. This naming, the reality, does not have to be the cause for despair. It doesn't have to lead us to more doom scrolling that's leading you nowhere anyway. Or it doesn't have to lead to more disengagement because of despair. So let's name what is and allow this naming to invoke in us reasons and rationales for acting and for acting on and asking ourselves, if not now, when. First of all, the threats to democracy are real. That's a big understatement. And second of all, the erosion of democracy is real. Rather than allow these, however, to impede our action, maybe they can propel our action. First of all, the threats to democracy are real and not imagined. Those who have studied this phenomenon and the rise of authoritarianism point to at least 4 characteristics of the rise of authoritarianism. These are stated in the book, The End of Democracy. So as I read their characteristics, let's do our own assessments. Let's take the pulse of democracy in America right now. So they say, first of all, the rejection or the weak commitment to democratic rules of the game. So I ask you, are we noticing any attempts to undermine the legitimacy of elections, for example, by refusing to accept credible electoral results? Second characteristic they mention is the denial of the legitimacy of political opponents. Now I ask you, do you notice any efforts of discounting without any basis in truth the citizenship, the commitment to America of one's partisan rivals? Third, they mention the toleration or the encouragement of violence. So I ask you, have you noticed any attempt to tactically endorse violence by their supporters by refusing to unambiguously condemn it? Fourth, they maintain the readiness to curtail civil liberties of opponents, including the media. So I ask, have you noticed any efforts to question the legitimacy of the media or to defend the civil rights of those who oppose their positions? So there is still a pulse. And while there's still a pulse, no matter how weak it may begin to feel, we can still do something. When we are able to recognize these patterns, they allow us to notice what would otherwise seem just like isolated and sometimes outrageous incidents for what they are, an attempt to erode the basis for democracy. Responsible truth, rule of law, trust in the electoral process, and respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person. According to the Freedom in the World 2022 report on the state of democracies around the world, the United States score fell by 11 points on a 100-point scale in the decade from 2010 to 2020, with an accelerated deterioration of 6 points during the presidency of Donald Trump. However, as they point out in their report, the weakening of American democracy did not start with former President Trump's direct pressure on democratic institutions and rights, and his departure from the White House has not ended the crisis. Newsflash. Disturbing problems that predated his administration, they write, legislative dysfunction, partisan gerrymandering, the excessive influence of special interest in politics, ongoing racial discrimination, and the spread of polarization and disinformation in the media environment remain unaddressed. Also, political participation has been impeded by a rise in threats against office holders. If indeed one of our guiding Unitarian Universalist principles for historical and theological reasons is the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, then we must acknowledge the absolute threats to the democracy that are very real in our time. We must understand that as a religious task and not just a political one. Thus, the path to hope starts first with our naming what is. And we must also recognize, as we do, that the erosion of democracy is real, that we can also actively participate in doing something about it in our everyday lives. The real point is that we can actually do something to stay engaged, to create communities, and to be strong communities with a strong voice that organize around what we really care for rather than abdicate our responsibility. There are several factors that are the cause of the current degradation of democracy. I'll share a few of them from the book that we've been referencing. Among the evidence to point to the kind of apathy that exists is that at least a third of American citizens are so disengaged in the democratic system that they didn't even vote in 2020 presidential elections, and only 37% voted in all three of the major elections in 2018, 2020, 2022. Whole group of people that didn't even engage. And Americans are woefully disengaged in the politics of their towns and their cities, their schools and their courts, with the absence of inaction, my friends. We have seen the vacuum can be filled by book banners, or library boards on library boards or school boards. There's a growing frustration and a disenchantment with what our democracy achieves when minority rule impedes what the majority want. So minority rule, in case you don't know, is a fact. For example, when Congress was split 50-50 in 21-22, the 50 Democratic senators represented 41.5 million more people than the 50 Republican senators. Moreover, the policies that the majority of Americans agree upon are often attacked and discounted by those who are in power or who maintain their power through dark money, manipulation of the truth, or political maneuvering. If we listen to the majority, 9 out of 10 Americans support background checks for purchasing guns. Most Americans support no excuse voting, and 77% support a federal holiday for voting in national elections. 61% of American adults say abortion should be legal in most cases, and 2/3 of Americans support prioritizing renewable energy sources, and 80% of Americans favor laws that protect the rights of LGBTQ plus people. Only 10% of Americans oppose laws that would protect trans people from discrimination. Yet, the majority voice gets drowned out and subverted, oftentimes by our own inaction. We might have become, as the authors call, an exhausted majority who disengage because of the sense that politics is corrupt or political discourse is toxic, and we lose our connection and understanding as Unitarian Universalists that our cultivating of the democratic process and the upholding of it is a religious task for us, connected to our history, connected to our theology. For democracy to function, the author said, we need more people who care about their communities to step up and help shepherd our country into the future. I believe that in a time when truth is devalued, that lies are deliberately told to get people's attention, we need to protect the erosion of the public square. I believe that it is a historical and theological duty for us as Unitarian Universalists to safeguard the public square, which is defined as a gathering place where community members meet together to meet, debate, gossip, and simply connect. A space that fosters dialogue, nurtures relationship, and shapes community norms and values. Our commitment to democracy means for us as Unitarian Universalists engaging in and upholding that practice of creating a public square within our congregations. My colleague, the Reverend Parisa Parser, offers this reflection. In our religious lives, the democratic process requires trust in the development of each individual conscience, a belief that such development is possible for each of us, as well as a commitment to cultivate our own conscience. We could call it a commitment to the value of each person. In the words of Theodore Parker, she writes, democracy means not a I'm as good as you are, but you are as good as I am. My connection with the sacred is only as precious as my willingness to acknowledge the same connection in others. And finally, perhaps the biggest factor in the erosion of our democratic process is what's called the hopelessness spiral. A downward cycle where feelings of powerlessness and being disconnected from the political process feed into each other, making it increasingly difficult to take action. Individuals begin to feel that their efforts are futile, leading to a withdrawal from civic activities. This disengagement amplifies feelings of isolation and hopelessness, creating a self-perpetuating loop of inaction. And so we need to engage in what Joanna Macy calls active hope as a practice. First, we need to be clear. We need to take a clear view of the reality that is, not the one that we imagine. I've tried to share some of that reality with you today. Second, we need to identify what we hope for in terms of the direction that we'd like things to move in or the values we would like to see. And third, we need to take steps to move ourselves or the situation in that direction. So among the various kinds of events that we will be having this fall in our congregation through our live stream programming is a workshop that Edris and I will be leading entitled Everyday Democracy, Claiming Our Place in caring for the common good. It'll be on Saturday, October 19th from 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. It'll be a participatory workshop that helps you clarify what you care about and how you can plot your own engagement in the world in ways that are accessible for you. Please join us. You'll see more in the e-news about that and more on our website.
Much of my advocacy efforts for democracy and social justice have been prompted and facilitated by First You. Our family, including Dave's and my 2 children, attended the largest climate march in the history of the U.S., Black Lives Matter vigils, and gun violence marches, all alongside fellow First You members and ministers. We have written postcards to people in other states to remind them to vote, and I've made comments at school board meetings and state congressional hearings. But there's something that all of us here do on a fairly regular basis that is also important to democracy, and that's coming to church. Okay, the idea of separation from church and state does not make it sound like coming to church is working towards democracy. But one problem with our democracy now is that many Americans no longer actively participate in a community. They are not tasked with getting to know new people and engaging in conversation with those who might have different interests or values while still maintaining a relationship. By coming to First You, you are maintaining relationships and exchanging new ideas. These are the many tiny threads in the large weave of democracy. And First You's many social justice efforts make our community a particularly vibrant force for democracy. So we will now take an offering. So please give as generously to the church as you can so that we can continue to be a community that fights for democracy. The different ways to contribute will be shown on the screen, and here in the sanctuary, baskets will be passed. Please join me in dedicating our offering to the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action. We dedicate our lives, and these are offerings.
Hail the glory us into the splendors of the city of the light.
Thank you, Rebecca and Kathy, for the music today. We will extinguish the chalice as I read these words by Darcy Roque. There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not right the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not heal every day. Each of us ministers to a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of divine presence every day. We will now have an announcement about the search committee from James Moser.
I promised not to keep you from your snacks more than 3 minutes. The search committee's been meeting for about 2 months now in phase 1 of our overall project, which is grooming a congregational profile that then becomes the tool that prospective ministers will see about our church. We've reached the point where we want to include your input. And that will happen in 2 ways in the coming weeks. Very soon you will receive an electronic church survey, and you'll be invited to fill that out and return it electronically. For those who need to have paper copies, they will be available starting next week. We will have a table in Parish Hall where you may come for information. If you need to have a paper copy of the survey, you can appropriate one then. The second aspect of gathering information and opinions from the congregation will be a series of what is called cottage meetings. I don't know that there'll be any cottages involved, but there'll be discussion meetings held, some here in the church, some will be following worship service on Sunday, others perhaps midweek. Other discussion meetings, cottage meetings, will be held at various other locations, and there will be some Zoom opportunities. Now, all of these will require that you register in advance. So as the information becomes more specific about dates, you'll be invited to then register either in person on a sign-up sheet at our table in the parish hall, or registering electronically online. Now, we expect to conclude this portion of gathering these responses from you by the end of October. So this will be an intensive 5 or 6 weeks coming up. And we will appreciate your input and your honesty and civility. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So our benediction is taken from the words of Theodore Parker, a Unitarian minister who indeed understood that his religion expressed itself in ethical living in the world and the organizing the society to oppose those things that decried the inherent worth and dignity of others. Strong abolitionist Theodore Parker wrote these words: "Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living." So let's join, rise as you embody your spirit as we sing our closing song, If I Had a Hammer.
If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out a warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and sisters all over this land. If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out warning, I'd ring out love between all of my siblings, all over this land. If I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between all of my siblings, all over this land. Well, I got a hammer, and I got a bell, and I got a song to sing all over this land. It's the hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about love between all of my siblings, all over this land.